So can you tell me under the which category of data type Boolean will come? Of course, it will come under integer. All these whole numbers with plus and minus sign, I will call it as an integer. It represents that you are not storing any data inside the variable. That is what none. Each value will be treated as object. There is no difference, only the brackets that you have to remember when it comes to the list and tuples. Hello everyone, I welcome all of you to the first session on data handling. So what is that I will learn in this session, sir? Different data types that we have in Python is what we are trying to understand in today's session. Yes, let me start with the first thing. What is that I'm going to discuss in this session? So the first thing that I would like to discuss is different data types that we have in Python. So what is the next one? So we have something called immutable and mutable types. Okay, so that is what I will be discussing in today's session. So let me start with the first concept. So different data types that I have in Python. So please observe. So guys, so I have different data types in Python. The first data type that I have is numbers. So in this numbers, in this category of data type, I have 4 different data types. So in fact, actually I have 3. The first one is integer. The first one is integer, the second one is floating point, and the third one is complex numbers. I will repeat for all of you. The first one is integer data type, the second one is floating data type, and the third one is complex number. But you need to observe, I have one more data type that is again subcategory of integer data type, that is Boolean. So I will be discussing all these data types individually one by one. So let us have a quick look of different data types that I have in Python. So this is a first data type that I have, that is numbers. What is the second one that I have? None. None is also one of the data type that I have in Python. So the third one is sequence. The third one is sequence. Please understand, this is what you will be learning in this entire here. Very important data type in fact. So you have strings, you have tuples and lists. So this is very important data types that you should remember. I will repeat for all of you. I have the data type called sequence. I have the data type called sequence. Under the category of sequence data type, you have 3 different data type. The first one is string, second one is tuples, third one is list. That is what you have to remember. Fine, I understood. So I have something called sequence. Then what next? I have sets. We will not be discussing much about this data type in your Python syllabus, but remember we have something called mapping. So we have something called mapping. So under the category of mapping, we have something called dictionaries, which we will be discussing in detail. So listen to me carefully. So we have different data types in Python. So we have numbers, none, sequence, sets and mapping. Under the category of numbers, please remember we have integer, we have floating point, we have complex number. So can you tell me under the which category of data type Boolean will come? Of course, it will come under integer. So fine, what is the second data type that I have? I have none, and the third one is sequence, and the fourth one, can you all tell me? Fourth one is sets, and the fifth one is mapping. Under the category of mapping, you will have data dictionary. So this is an overview of different data types that you have in Python. Let me start with integers. Let me discuss one by one about all this data type what you have. Yes, so moving on. So guys, I have numbers. In this numbers, I have already told you we have integer, we have floating point, we have complex number, right? So what is integer? All the whole numbers, whatever you have, for example 10, 20, 30, 40, all these whole numbers with plus and minus sign, all these whole numbers with plus and minus sign, I will call it as an integer. All this will come to the category of integer. Then what is this floating point number? Please observe, Suppose if I write 10.25, so this is what I will call it as a floating point number. So this number has got two parts. This is integer part and this is floating part. So guys, this kind of numbers is what I will call it as a floating numbers. This kind of numbers is what I will call it as a floating numbers or floating point numbers. That is what you have to remember. When it comes to the floating point numbers, you can have larger number, you can have a range of numbers. That is what you have to remember. So fine. What is the next one that I have? I have complex number. You all know that the complex number has got two parts. One is real number, another one is imaginary number. So for example, I've taken example here, 0 plus 3j is what I have taken, or 0 plus 3.1j, whatever the number that I have, I will be storing it in the variable called x. So let us imagine this is a complex number. Let us imagine this is a complex number. I have a privilege in Python that I can store the complex number. So what is the use of storing the complex number? Suppose if I want to print only the real number of this complex number, what is that I will do? X dot real is what I will be printing. So what is for imaginary number? X dot imag is what I will be typing, guys, to just print only the imaginary number or to just print only the real number. So when it comes to the complex number, so I can also store the complex number, so in a variable called x dot real number, in the sense the real part of this complex number will be printed, x dot imaginary, that is imag, so only the imaginary number of this complex number will be printed. That is what you have to understand. So this is the beauty of Python. So we don't deal usually with complex numbers in any of the programming languages except Python. So it's a very unique feature that we have in Python. That is what you have to remember. This is all about the numbers data type. Let me just give you an example. So can you all identify? So 5 belongs to what data type? So 5 belongs to integer, 39 belongs to integer. So let me discuss this. So can you all tell me which data type? Can you all tell me which data type? 35,000.75. You can see this floating point number. So that's why I will call it as a floating point number. So guys, this is also floating point number. You have a dot. So guys, can you all tell me what type of data type is this? So guys, this is a complex number. But remember, I have something called true and false. What is this true and false? Can you explain us? Yes. Remember, I have something called integer data type. That is what we have discussed, right? So under the category of integer, we have something called Boolean, right? So this Boolean consists of two values, that is true or false. This data type consists of two values, that is true or false. True in the sense 1, false in the sense 0. So that's what you have to understand. But in fact, I will not be writing 1 or 0. So I will be just using this keyword. True is a keyword and false is a keyword. That is what you have to remember. So if at all if you remember, if you are using true, you need to understand the value of true will be 1 and the value of false will be 0. That's why I will call it as a Boolean values. So which comes under the category of integer. So I will just give you a quick recap. So we have a data type. In this data type, we have 5 different data types. So the first one that we are trying to discuss is numbers. So under the category of numbers, the first one is integer, the second one is floating point number, third one is complex number. Under the category of integer, we have Boolean. This is the first set of numbers that you should remember. So guys, can you all just quickly tell me, like, how do you identify numbers? The whole numbers, you can also have plus and minus symbol. So that is what I will call it as an integer. If at all you have this dot, that is what I will call it as a floating point. This point I will call it as a floating point. So if you have this floating point, that you should treat it as floating point number, and you will have the complex numbers. You will have the complex numbers which has got imaginary and real numbers. This is all about the first category of data type that we have. Moving on to the second one. So guys, before that, I would like to tell you none. We had something called none. So right, none in the sense it represents that you are not storing any data inside the variable. That is what none. What is the meaning of none? You are not storing, there is no value, there is an absence of value is what you need to understand if we are using the none as a data type. So that is the second data type that we have. What is the third one that we have? So guys, we had the third one as sequence. Under sequence, we have strings. Under the sequence, we have a data type called strings. Please understand, we have different types of data type. The first one is number, second one is done, third one is sequence. Under the category of sequence, we have first one, that is strings. What is strings? Strings is a group of characters. I can also say it as a collection of characters. What is the meaning of characters? It can be alphabets, it can be numbers, it can be a special characters, it can be any characters. So that is why I will call it as a group of characters which is enclosed between the quotes, You need to understand one thing. So I am using both the quotes, single quotes as well as double quotes. In Python, you can use both the quotes. Both the quotes exchanges the same meaning. That is what you have to understand. So fine. Why do I use this quotes? What is the meaning of it? Just to indicate the beginning and the end of the string. So we are using the quotes. So that is what you have to understand with respect to the string data type. What is string data type? It is a collection of characters. Let's take an example. So let's take, can I treat this as a string? Of course I can treat this as a string because it is a collection of character. Each letter I will be calling it as I will be treating it as a character. So can I call this as a string? Yes, 1 ABC. Can I call this as a string? Yes, I can call this as a string. What type of data type is this? This is a string data type. This is a string data type. So can I call this as a string data type? Yes, you can call. So guys, collection of characters. I have alphabets, I have special character. Let me write 1. So I have number, I have alphabets, I have special character also. So in short, you need to understand string in the sense it is a group of characters which is enclosed between the quotes. That is what you have to understand. So this is the first data type under the category of sequence. Sir, you did not speak anything about sequence. What is the meaning of sequence? Please observe, I have more than one character, one by one. So that is why in this category of sequence, I will have the element one by one sequentially. So that is why I will call this data types as a category of sequence data type. So I will repeat for all of. Why do you classify this data type under the category of sequence? Because my data object, whatever I have, this is what I will call it as a data object, or I will call this as a character. So I have one after the other. So I have one after the other. That's why I will call it as a sequence. One after the other in the sense what? Sequentially. So that's why I will call it as a sequence data type. Under the category of sequence data type, I have string. The same way I have one more, that is list. Please understand, I have the next data type under the category of sequence, that is list. What is list, sir? Can you explain in detail about this list? Yes, list is one of the data type that you have in Python. What is the speciality of list? The first thing that you have to remember when it comes to the list is square brackets. What is that you should remember? When it comes to the category or when it comes to the concept of list, the first important thing that you have to remember is square brackets. Whatever the value that you wanted to store in the list, you will be storing that inside this list, inside this square bracket. I will repeat for all of you. Whatever the value that you wanted to store inside the list, you will store inside this square bracket. So that is very, very important. Point number 1. What type of values that I can store? So please remember, any type of values you can store inside the list. I will repeat for all of you, any type of values you can store inside the list, because each value, whatever you are trying to store, each value will be treated as object. Each value will be treated as object. So for example, so I will just tell you, I will take A. So this is the list that I'm trying to create. How do I create? So I have to use this square bracket. So fine, I will write 1. So 2, 3. So this is my list. This is my list. What do I have inside this list? I have integers inside this list. What is the name of the list? A is the name of the list. Fine. So let me take one more example. So I'll just write 1 comma A B 3. So can I have something like this? Of course you can have. So I have 1. Please observe, I have A, but I have enclosed it with the quotes. I have enclosed it with the quotes. That is what you have to observe here. Whenever you are considering, whenever you are storing the string, so you have to enclose it with the quotes. You have to enclose it with the quotes. Suppose when it comes to the integer, you don't have to enclose it with the quotes, is what you have to remember. So what is this? What is the example that you are trying to give, sir? You can have mixed data type. You can store the mixed data type inside the list. Each value, whatever you have, 1, A, B, 3, all the values, whatever you have, so all the values will be treated as object. So object is what you have to remember when it comes to the concept of list. So when it comes to the concept of list, mixed data type you can store inside the list. But remember one thing, whatever the values that you have, so after each value, after each object, you should have the comma separator, so that it will help you to store multiple values. It will help you to store multiple values is what you have to remember as of now. But we have a lot of things to learn with respect to this list concept. We have a different separate chapter for this list. I will be discussing how do I use this list, what are the different operations that I can perform with respect to this list. So what are the advantages that I have? What are the disadvantages that I have with respect to the list? So I will be discussing in detail with respect to this list in the coming chapter. So moving on to the next data type that I have in the category of sequence. So I have tuples. It's very simple. I don't have to tell you much about tuples if you have understood list. So the only thing that you should remember is small parentheses, that is small brackets. So there, when it comes to the list, so you have to remember square brackets. So but when it comes to the tuples, you have to remember the small brackets. There is no difference, only the brackets that you have to remember when it comes to the list and tuples. So then why do we use this list? We could have used tuples, right? So but I have some of the important differences that I have when I'm performing some operations, which I will be discussing in detail when it comes to the chapter called tuples. So I have a separate chapter called tuples. I will be discussing that in detail. So what exactly the difference that you have with respect to tuples and list. So but as of now, what is that you have to remember? So the first thing that you have to remember is small brackets. And the second thing, so let me just try to create the tuples for all of you. So T is a variable that I'm trying to create. So what type of variable is this? Is a tuple. This is a tuple that I'm trying to create. So fine, I have 1 comma 2 comma 3. What type of values that I have stored inside the tuples? Integer values. So let me just take one more example. T is equal to A comma B 1 2. So can I store something like this? Yes, of course you can store this values also. You can also store the mixed data type inside this tuples. That is very, very important. Fine. So then after that, what is that I have to do next? So that is what you have to understand. So guys, please understand, I have some major difference between the list and tuples, which I will be discussing in the coming classes when I'm start discussing about tuples. As of now, you just have to remember this. I can store multiple data inside this tuples. So fine. You got the fair idea about tuples. Moving on to the next one, I have dictionaries. What is this dictionaries? I have something called mapping that I told you in the beginning. The next data type that I have sets, which I will not be discussing about sets. We don't have in the syllabus. The next and the last data type that we have is mapping. So what is that I have in mapping? So I have something called dictionary. I have something called dictionary. Please understand very carefully. So I'll just try to give you the recap. So list in the sense, what is that you have to remember? You have to remember the square bracket. So what is that you will remember? If I say something about tuples, you will remember about parenthesis. The next data type that I have is dictionary. So that is square bracket. That is square bracket. This class is all about brackets today. Okay. If you just remember this brackets, the entire class summary will be with you. Remember, so if I say something about square brackets, automatically you should remember dictionaries. Then how do I use this dictionaries? Dictionaries is a pair of key and value. I will repeat for all of you. Dictionary is a pair of key and value. Dictionary is a pair of key and value. So that's what you have to remember. Point number 1. I will repeat for all of you. Dictionary is a pair of key and value. So let me just explain this in detail for all of you. So what is the dictionary name that I have? I have D. So what is the name of the dictionary? D. So guys, whatever the first thing that I have, so this is what I will call. This is what I will call it as a key. This is what I will call it as a key. And remember, this is colon. This is colon. Then after that, what I have is a value. What I have is a value. Then after that, I have to give the comma. So this is a pair of key and value. This is a pair of key and value is what you have to remember. So whenever you are writing this key, always that key is unique. That key should be unique. Using that key, so you will be able to access this value. I will repeat for all of you. Whenever you are giving a key, that key should be unique. That key should be unique. I have used A here. I cannot use A again because the key should be unique. Using this key, I will be accessing the value. Using this key, I will be accessing the value. That is what you have to remember. That is what you have to remember at this point of time. So what is data dictionary? Data dictionary is a pair of key and value. Point number 1. Point number 2, what is the type of brackets that you will use? Second point, that is flower brackets. What is the third point that you should remember? So always my key in the data dictionary, it should be unique. So that is what you have to remember when it comes to the data dictionary. What are the different types of operations that I can perform? What is the different functions that I have in data dictionaries? What is that I can perform in data dictionaries is what I will be discussing in detail in the chapter called data dictionaries. You have a chapter in the coming classes which I will be discussing in detail about this data dictionaries. Just to give you brief information about what is dictionary is what I have discussed in today's session. So guys, this is all about the different data types that we have. Let me just try to recap all the data types that you have. So guys, let me just write DT as a data type. So what is the first data type that you have? So you have something called numbers. You have something called numbers. So inside this number, what is that you have? So guys, you have integer, and then you have floating point, and then you have complex number under the category of integer. What is that you have? You have, come on, tell me, you have boolean. You have boolean. So this is all about the numbers. This is all about the numbers. What is the second one that you have? You have none. So you have none as a second data type. And the third one is sequence. What is the third one that you have? Sequence. Under the category of sequence, come on, tell me everybody. So you have strings. You have strings. Come on, tell me what is the next one? List. And the last one is tuples. So after this, so guys, tell me what is the next one that you have? You have sets. So after sets, you have something called mapping. So under the mapping, you have data dictionary. So just this is what you have to remember. So after that, integer in the sense it's a whole number, floating point in the sense point. Whatever you have decimal numbers, that is what you will call it as a floating point. So complex number in the sense real number and imaginary number is what you have to remember. So boolean in the sense true or false is what you have to remember. So then when it comes to none, so the meaning of none in the sense you are not storing any data type or any values is what you have to remember. Sequence, when it comes to the sequence, the first one is string. So you have to remember double quotes or you have to remember single quotes when it comes to the string. So what is list? So you will remember the square brackets, tuples, you will remember the parenthesis. When it comes to the data dictionary, you will just remember the flower brackets is what I'm trying to give you the recap of all the data types, whatever you have. So hope I made it clear and simple for all of you. So moving on to the next one. So that is mutable type and immutable type. So guys, it's very important thing that you have to understand. So the first topic that I'm going to discuss now is immutable type. What is this immutable type? Which are all the data types will comes under the category of immutable type. So before that, before discussing this immutable data types that we have, I will just tell you what exact immutable and immutable data types. Suppose I have something like this inside the memory location. If I can replace this with something else in the same location, what is this? Imagine this is a memory location. I have stored it inside the memory location. If I can replace this with something else in the same location, that is mutable. That is mutable. Suppose if I cannot replace this in the same memory location, that is immutable. That is immutable. Imagine I will take the car inside the car garage and I will park. So can I remove it and can I park some other car? Yes. So that is mutable. I have constructed a house in the same place. Can I remove that and can I place some other house? No, that is immutable. I'm speaking with respect to the place. I'm speaking with respect to the place. So I cannot replace something else, right? So that is what you have to understand. So here my house is data. Here my house is data and the car is data and the place is memory. That is what you have to understand. I have the memory and I'm storing something in the same memory location. I'm trying to replace something in the same memory location. If I'm able to change, that is mutable. If I'm not able to change, that is immutable. So let me discuss what are the different data types that I have which comes under the category of immutable. So fine, I have integer. I have integer, floating point number, boolean, strings, tuples. All these data types will comes under the category of immutable. Will comes under the category of immutable. What exactly is this? You gave me an example which is very general. Can you just give us some technical example? Yes. Let's say I have something called hello. I have something called hello, right? So can I replace this H in this particular memory location? If I am able to replace, then it will come under the category of mutable. If I am not able to replace, it will come under the category of immutable. What data type is this? This is string. So do I have here? So yes, I have. So I will not be able to replace this in this particular memory location. Let me just tell you, this is A. So guys, if I want to access this H, so I have to write H of 0. So why are you writing 0, sir? Please understand, the index of this character will be like this. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Suppose if I want to access L, so this L, can you tell me what is the memory location that I have to use? A of, what is this A? Name of this string. So A of 3, A of 3, this is the index, this particular location. I cannot replace something like this. I cannot write like this. This operation I cannot perform. This operation I cannot perform. In this particular location, instead of L, I cannot place K. So this is the reason that I will call string as a immutable data type. The same thing will happen for all this data type, which will not allow me to replace the value in the same memory location. That's why I have listed all these things. The first one that you have is integer. The second one that you have is floating point. And the third one is boolean. And fourth one is string. The last one is tuples. So all these things will comes under the category of immutable. So what is the next thing that I have? So the next thing is mutable, obviously. So guys, mutable data type. So what is the different mutable data types that you have? So guys, lists, dictionaries, sets. So these things will comes under the mutable data type. What is the meaning of mutable data type? So you can replace the values. You can replace the values. So in the same memory location. So that's why I will call these data types as a mutable data types. These data types as a mutable data types. So guys, I think I have given you the enough content today. So hope I made it very simple and clear. So thank you very much. Take care of your family. Thank you. Bye bye.